Now, if you don't know, the Big Banter is a knife designed by Ben Peterson. This guy right here.
What is up, guys?
If you think he looks familiar, that's probably because he used to be a host over on Blade HQ.
Hey, what is up, guys? This is Ben from Blade HQ.
He since left Blade HQ and started his own knife company called Nafs, where he designed this knife right here in collaboration with We Knives. Now, because I see this knife absolutely everywhere, and it was sent to me by Jared over at Neves Knives.
Oh, so that is the Banter?
Today, we're going to be taking a look at it, as well as take a look at some knife design aspects that you may or may not have thought about before. So you don't end up doing this to your brand new knife. That blade will take a chunk out of your thumb. Now, I don't know, Ben. I'm not associated with Nafs in any way, and I didn't pay for this knife with my own money. It was sent to me by Jared. So I can literally say anything I want to and do anything I want to with this knife. To prove that, I subjectively didn't like this knife at first. For some reason it doesn't, me and it doesn't agree. At least until I actually started carrying it and using it and trying to figure out exactly why I didn't like it. The weird thing is, after using it, I discovered this is actually a really good knife. The blade steel is CPM 20CV at 61.5 HRC. It sharpens easily on diamond stones, deburrs very well, and has great edge retention. And it's built like a tank.
Do whatever you want with it, man. Break it, test it.
This is a solid built knife. And it's a knife that I should like. It's right up my alley as a heavy user. So what was my problem? Well, it was me, for the most part. So I realize that a lot of you have already figured this out, but I'm smarter than the average person, primarily because I'm left-handed. And so I have to carry all of my pocket knives in my left-hand pocket. And for those of you who are a little slow, use my left hand out of my left-hand pocket to open them. And because of that, it makes this knife really difficult to open.
So here's a couple things about knife design you probably never wanted to know.
So because this knife is a liner lock, in order for your finger to access the liner, in order to disengage the lock, one side of the knife scale has to have a slight recess, so that your finger can have the room to disengage the lock. Now, the problem that this presents is that the thumb studs for flicking open the knife have clearance on one side to allow your finger to get underneath the lock, but on the other side, the lock side, the thumb stud is closer to the scale, which means there's not enough clearance on that left side of the knife to easily flip open the knife. So as a lefty with below average intelligence, I decided if I could see if I could fix this problem. So I was able to actually fix this knife for left-handed people by simply grinding away just a tiny bit of material on this left-hand scale. You know, it's interesting because I did not take away that much material, but just that tiniest little bit made all the difference when it comes to actually opening the knife left-handed. So now I've got the left-handed opening issues sorted. There's actually two other main problems that I see with this knife. Now remember, these are completely subjective problems. These are my own opinions, and some of you may like these features, and that's okay. But for me, the problem that I have with this blade design is the double choil design. I'm really not a fan of this secondary or sharpening choil, and I'm really not a fan of this primary choil. In my opinion, get rid of both of these and extend the blade all the way down to the handle and allow the handle to do what it was designed to do, be a handle. I don't want to have to switch my grip in order to get into the sweet spot of the blade. My grip should be the grip and the blade should already be in the sweet spot. So one of the reasons that I don't like sharpening choils is because sometimes as you're cutting stuff, the stuff can get caught on the choil itself and it binds up, and you have to consciously keep the knife or keep the cutting edge in the material that you're cutting. And I typically don't like doing things consciously. Now a good example of this is cutting thicker, fluffy stuff like fiberglass insulation, foam board, etc. And you haven't worked construction long enough if you haven't cut one of these things at least once with your pocket knife. So here we have the Manix 2 cutting foam, and you can see it cut right through this foam perfectly cleanly. However, with a choil, you end up pulling small chunks out of the foam since they get caught in the choil. Again, it's a conscious effort to keep certain things out of there than it is if you simply don't have a choil in the first place. In my opinion, they cause more problems than they solve. So since I can't add material to the blade, I decided to sharpen the sharpening choil. Does this fix the issue? Sort of. It's definitely better to have a sharpened choil than a dull one. Basically, it's a single serration. So it's not perfect. It still wants to pull out a little bit when you're cutting, but it is way better than it was before. You can actually continue the cut now rather than completely having to pull the knife out and restart it. It just sort of, if you get into that choil area, it sort of like cuts through it versus tear through it. I mean, it still tears a little bit, but you can continue the cut versus stopping the cut completely. So what about this primary choil? Well, unfortunately, there's no way to fix this, but I believe there's actually a very good reason some designers decide to do this that you may not have thought about before. Now, with this being a liner lock, this can present a little bit of a problem. Let me show you what that problem is. So here we have two knives. We have the Spyderco Resilience and the Big Banter. One of these has the primary choil on it, as you can see here. Spyderco Resilience does not have that secondary choil. Essentially, the blade comes all the way down to the handle, and that allows you to get a really good grip on the blade. But this presents somewhat of a problem when it comes to closing the knife. Now, as you can see, if we have the sharpened portion of the blade coming all the way down to the handle, when we push the liner lock and close the blade, that sharpened blade is literally coming right down on top of your thumb. And if you don't get your thumb out of the way in time, that blade will take a chunk out of your thumb. Ask me how I know. Now we'll look at the Big Banter, and you can see with the choil there, as we close the knife, we don't have that problem. The sharpened portion of the blade is farther away from your thumb, and it actually provides somewhat of a safety as you're closing the knife. So we'll close it one-handed. You can actually close it right on top of your thumb there, and there's no problems whatsoever. Versus something like the Spyderco Resilience or the Spyderco Tenacious, as you close that blade, it can literally cut your thumb. And if you close this fast and hard, you could easily lose a chunk of your thumb. Now for me, I'm a big person and I can take responsibility for my own decisions and using somewhat dangerous tools like this. And personally, I prefer to not have the choil, but that's just me personally. Some of you would probably prefer to keep that safety aspect in the knife and switch your grip. But again, if my finger is not out of the way when I'm closing my blade, that's my fault. And I'm willing to take that risk for a little bit more usability, in my opinion. Now, if these two issues don't bother you, I would 100% recommend this knife. I think it is it's one of the more solidly built knives that I've seen in a very long time. We Knives has done a really good job with the heat treatment on this, great edge retention. I really can't say kind of enough about it in terms of the build quality, even down to how easy it comes apart. This is one of the easier knives that you can take apart, I think, that you can possibly get. It just comes apart and goes back together super easily, which if you're using this as a work knife is also very important since you're gonna get it dirty, you're gonna have to take it apart to clean it, so on and so forth. But it comes apart and goes back together so easily, it's almost a non-topic. It's perfect in that sense. It's just a great, solidly built knife. If those two issues, if my two personal issues don't bother you, then I would highly recommend this as a work knife.